Brian Murphy here with Ben Goessling, TwinCities.com, heading into Week 5. Tennessee Titans at the 3-1, suddenly 3-1, and unexpected 3-1 Minnesota Vikings, who are sitting pretty right now after the first quarter of the season, feeling pretty good about themselves, but also trying to manage their expectations a little bit. I think they realize how, if not fortunate, at least how much they really need to seize the opportunity here to really make something, because they do seem to have something special brewing, and their schedule sets up really well right now. 3 of their next 4 at home against a struggling Titans team on Sunday. How do you expect them to manage their newfound fame?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, because like you say, the schedule coming up here sets up pretty well. I mean, you have 3 of the next 4 at home, 3 probably fairly winnable games between Tennessee and Washington and Tampa Bay coming up here before you get Arizona, which should be a pretty good test. I guess Arizona is the 3rd game in that stretch, but it's not a position that I think anybody expected the Vikings to be in here. So how they handle this is going to be interesting to see. I think they're saying all the right things. Now, whether they believe them or not, we'll kind of have to wait and see if they're staying as humble as they try to say that they're staying. But the approach so far has worked for them. I think they ran the ball obviously well on Sunday. Kind of almost used that as a second form of defense to keep the Lions off the field, and that has continued to work for them. I'm still interested to see if they get into a game at some point where somebody can throw all over them and they have to score 3 or 4 touchdowns offensively. They haven't had to do that yet, and we'll see if they have to, but so far so good.
I mean, Percy Harvin went into the game at Detroit as the leading player with most receptions in the league, and the Lions seemed to find a way to take him out of their game plan. Vikings didn't do much offensively at all. I mean, Adrian Peterson ran the ball well, chewed up a lot of clock, but they got 2 special teams touchdowns, and they really didn't move much at all. I mean, Simpson drew a couple of pass interference calls, but they still, you're right, have not shown much what they're going to be able to do downfield. But again, they don't feel like they necessarily have to.
Yeah.
I mean, even Ponder said today, look, we're a run-first team, and we're not going to take chances, and I'm pretty much most proud of the fact that I haven't thrown an interception yet. So, Harvin is one of these guys that can do a lot of different things on a lot of different places on the field. I mean, where do you think he's at in the NFL right now? And our team's really taken notice of all of his talents.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to. We were talking to Mike Munchak, Tennessee's coach, earlier today, and he said he's the guy that Harvin is the guy that you have to be aware of all the time on the field. But teams are going to start paying more attention to him. I think we saw it last week. We saw Detroit kind of rolling safeties his way. He said it was the most double coverage he's seen. Christian Ponder said it wasn't all that different. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of all that gamesmanship. But yeah, I mean, he's certainly a guy that if you can get him in space and if he can make one guy miss, he's off to the races. And we saw it on Sunday, obviously, with the kickoff return. So he has a lot of ways of affecting a game right now. And there aren't too many other guys in the league that can do it on as many levels as he does.
Defensively, I mean, they've just been playing really well. They've been stuffing the run, making plays when they had to. This was something that was obviously missing last year, but they got a team right now coming in, Tennessee. They ran the ball well last week with Chris Johnson. I mean, he had his best game since late last year. Adrian Peterson also had his best game of the season. This would have been a huge marquee matchup maybe in 08 or 09.
Yeah.
But right now it's they're sort of trying to find themselves again. How do you see that matchup playing out, and does it really matter right now which team's got the better running back?
I don't know that it does, but I think it's interesting in the sense that both of these guys in their second year in the league is when they really kind of caught fire. I mean, Adrian Peterson's best year was his second year, and I think that's when Chris Johnson also ran for 2,000 yards. So, I mean, you see teams start to key on these 2 guys, and maybe that opens other things up. But, I mean, especially if Jake Locker's not able to play and Matt Hasselbeck is the quarterback for Tennessee, and the Vikings kind of being where they are, I think we will see a lot of these guys simply because they're each team's best weapon right now. These are not teams with dynamic passing games, especially if Jake Locker is out for Tennessee. So I think a lot of this could depend on which team can control time of possession, can control the game with their running game, because we're not going to see anybody stretching the field, I don't think, like we do with other teams in the league.
I mean, the Vikings certainly haven't taken those chances yet. I mean, maybe they will try to open some things up now that Simpson's back in for a second week. But, a week from now, we should be talking about a Vikings team that's at 4-1 heading into a road game at Washington, or we'll probably be tearing them down as being too overconfident at 3-2, stumbling at home. But that's just sort of the nature of the NFL. But I got to imagine that this is sort of a jumping off game for them right now, because they really can't afford to lose at home to an underachieving team.
Well, yeah, and you're playing an underachieving team that's missing its quarterback by all accounts, and this is a team that defensively hasn't really stopped anybody. I mean, defensively, the Titans are as bad as anybody in the league at this point. So if you have a chance to open up the offense, maybe this is it. And if you can do that, maybe you give teams something else to think about. But yeah, if they're 4-1 going into the Redskins game, it's going to be a lot harder to say this team isn't for real. And if you can get to that point with all the home games they have coming up, and with all the other things going on in the division, with the Packers struggling a little bit, barely kind of hanging on last week. The Lions obviously 1-3. They're on a bye this week. So if you can win and at least keep pace with the Bears and get to 4-1, I think the expectations start to change quite a bit, because it's getting harder and harder to say this isn't. It's harder to say this is a fluke at this point.
Quite a turnaround from a year ago when they started 0-4 en route to a 3-13 debacle. So we'll be checking in again next week. For Ben Goessling, Brian Murphy for TwinCities.com.